Okay, we might as well get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Before we begin, we're going to take a quick tour around the WebEx meeting room screen in front of you. Please note that we've now turned on the recording function to archive and playback on the Effective Teaching and Learning website, so you are now being recorded. To make your screen larger, there is a diagonal pointed arrow somewhere in the right-hand corner. If you click on this, you'll be able to view the session full screen. Also in the top right-hand corner, you'll find a list of participants, and below that, the chat screen. On some computers, you'll see little tabs. You can click on that to have them appear. We are using the chat screen for the session, so please type your questions or comments using the chat function during the presentation. Please note that the chat is public and will be recorded, so this will be included in the archived session of the presentation. After the presentation, we'll open the floor for a Q&A. And finally, in WebEx, background noise is a huge distraction. I need to ask all of you to mute your telephone, headset, or microphone. If you start talking or somebody walks into your office and wants to chat for a couple of minutes, we will hear that if you do not put everything on mute. Welcome to our second Faculty Growth and Evaluation Process Professional Development for academic leaders who are evaluators on their campus. My name is Allison Rhodes, and I'm an Academic Improvement Specialist with System Academics. Just so you know, these sessions will be hosted monthly and will be 1 hour via WebEx. Remind your colleagues that could not be here to listen to the archive sessions, which again will be on the ET&L website, as we are tracking participation. So to begin, I'm delighted to introduce today's presenter. Dustin Solomon is currently the Instructional Effectiveness Specialist for the Online and Graduate Studies campus and was an adjunct faculty member for the Cass City campus. Prior to starting full-time at Baker College, Dustin was a Director of Curriculum Technology and Special Education in the K-12 environments and brings an abundance of enthusiasm and knowledge to Baker College. At this point, I would like to turn the session over to Dustin. And I will move my stuff for you, Dustin.
Okay. Well, thank you, Allison, for that introduction. Surprisingly, I did not write that for her, if you believe that or not.
I would have let you.
I know you would have. I'm going to give you a second while you pass the ball to me.
Yep. Okay.
Ah, there we go. Now, okay, is everyone able to see my desktop okay?
Nope.
I heard a no.
Okay, I have it. You need to put it in presentation format?
Yep.
In slide?
Okay. Just making sure you can see it. Okay.
Yep.
Well, welcome everyone. We have a huge crowd today. I'm very happy to see that. While we get started, what I'd really like everyone to do is to, in the chat box, throw up what campus you're representing today. We have a very wide variety of these presentations are geared towards the evaluators for the faculty growth and evaluation process that we have across the campus. So we have lots of people here from different campuses. Make sure that in the chat box that you're sending it to everyone, not specifically me, or everyone's not going to be able to see what campus you're representing today. And if at any point in time you have any questions, as Allison said, do throw them up in the chat box. And I'm going to ask Allison to kind of pay attention to that and let me know if I need to stop and answer any. I tend to get on a roll and I may forget to look at it. While everyone's putting up their campus, I'm going to go ahead and get started. For those of you who are representing our online campus, or have possibly been teaching for online at one point in time, you probably are familiar with the discussion board best practices. It's a presentation that a lot of us have seen. However, we're going to be looking at it from a slightly different perspective today, because while we're talking about the discussion board best practices, and I'll give you an overview of where they come from and what they are here in a second, but because you're going to be evaluators as the new requirements roll out in terms of the Blackboard minimum expectations, there's two parts that come with that. The first part is paying attention to what it is you actually need to be looking for in terms of, yes, we have this requirement that we're going to be using the discussion boards, but what does it look like when we use it in a quality way? So the first part is knowing what you're looking for. And the second part is the intent of the faculty growth and evaluation process is it's meant to be a coaching process, a quality conversation that you're having with faculty members. So let's say that you have a faculty member that is not utilizing the discussion board in a quality driven way. Well, what are some recommendations that you can make to begin to put them on a path of improvement? The recommendation has to come with support, and so that's the other half of this. And so as we go, not only am I hopefully going to kind of give you a clear picture of what these best practices are, but then also discuss what are some ways in which the best practices can be utilized in the within the discussion board. And this isn't specific to on-ground or online. I would say that because of the history of where these best practices have come from, they're going to feel a little bit more online-sided. However, as the discussion board is utilized more and more and becomes more entrenched in the on-ground classes, you're going to see that difference really begin to fade. And discussion boards, whether they're used in an online classroom, a blended learning classroom, or a traditional face-to-face, or I guess we would call that web-enhanced now, you're going to have discussion boards used in best practices are like good teaching. Regardless of the environment or the topic, good teaching is good teaching. So I'll get off my soapbox and get started with the presentation now. The best practices have come from the years of use of the Blackboard learning management system by the online college, Baker Online, and it's our way, because the discussion board is the online version of the class face-to-face conversation that you have with students when you're in the classroom. And so it's really important to define what that looks like in a very quality-driven way, because it doesn't necessarily come out in a really intuitive process for some people. And so the discussion board can be utilized in many different ways, but again, we're going for that quality factor. We're not just saying we're utilizing this and we're putting stuff up in the discussion board. We want to make sure that what we're putting up really adds value to the classroom and to the experience. And so with our faculty members, when we're coaching them on quality teaching practices, in the discussion board we say that there are three things that they need to be doing. They need to be pushing content, and that's taking the classroom topics and constantly pushing the information out to the students, making sure that you are adding information, you're climbing Bloom's taxonomy as you're teaching, and you are growing the student's exposure to that content. The second thing is that they need to connect content to practical applications. For every class that a student takes at Baker College, there should be a reason why they're taking that class. In some programs, it's a very clear-cut reason. If a student is taking a finance class, if a student is taking a criminal justice class or a programming class, obviously those classes connect to the student's career goals. So that becomes a very clear-cut path, and there are lots of different ways to provide that practical application. But you may have students that are taking general education courses, and in which case that becomes a little bit more difficult, but there are still practical applications to be had. There are still ways to connect that class to the student's career goals, to their real-life experiences, and so it's important to tease those out and to utilize those to show the student that there is a valuable reason why they're taking those courses, and it's not simply because they have to. And then the last thing that a faculty member should be doing, or from this list anyways, within the discussion board, is engaging students actively to guide discussion. Teaching is never a passive situation, and so it is only through active engagement that the instructors can truly guide the discussion and steer it towards towards the SLOs, the outcomes for the actual course, for the seminar, for the week, what have you. And so that becomes a really, really important piece of it, because it's very easy to throw out a question and sit back and say that you're guiding students because you carefully worded and crafted a question or a post for a discussion board. But the reality is that anytime a student responds to a post within a discussion board, it's almost as though it has an infinite number of ways in which it can go. You don't want it to go in an infinite number of ways. You want to be very focused and purposeful and intentional with the way that students respond or the way that they engage with the topics. And so you really need to actively guide that. So let's break each of these three practices down and look at some different ways in which they actually play out. Oops. Okay, so when we talk about pushing content, the ways that we push content is posting content on the discussion board that's relevant to the concepts that are being discussed in the classroom. Then we have presenting new content and concepts. Now, new content and concepts, well, aren't we doing that constantly because, you know, we're progressing through the course? Well, there are so many different facets of each topic that we discuss, and there's so many different ways that it can be discussed and explained and examples that can be shown. And it's a constant need to show topics and information in new lights. And so while, of course, you're going to be progressing through the class, but you don't throw out the entire amount of information at one time. You may need to chunk it and show different pieces or different facets of that topic. Presenting problems that occur in real life and require students to design solutions, and so allowing them to actually see the way that the topics play out and then provide them with opportunities to actually apply that information. And then, of course, synthesizing content to show practical application. And so they're actually, the instructor is modeling for the students how they're actually going to use this, how they're actually going to take this information, translate it, and apply it in a real-life situation. And then also, whenever possible, across different divisions, or not divisions, but contexts. When we talk about providing practical application, we're connecting content to that practical application. So connecting the content to a real-life application, to a job application. And again, as I said before, when you're in a general education class, such as, you know, maybe it's a literature class, that becomes a lot more difficult. It can be done, but it's not as clear-cut and easy to do as it is in some more career-specific fields. Providing examples is a huge way because, I'm sorry, not a huge way, a huge opportunity to provide practical application, because students oftentimes really need to see how that topic actually plays out. They may understand a definition of something, they may understand all the steps of something, but to actually see it played out or to walk through it can provide them a very different understanding of it. Exploring current issues relative to course content. Well, current issues are a constant thing because just everything is changing so fast. We're gaining more and more information, and every professional organization seems to have information provided that shows how the certain career fields are playing out on a daily basis. And so providing that and linking students to that.
Did you know that Baker College has been recognized as one of the country's premier career colleges? Over the
John,
past decade,
I need you to mute your
If you would like to have the kind of career that brings you more opportunities,
Allison, if you hover over his name, then you can mute him. Thank you, Allison. And then relating information back to professional experiences. Every individual, for the most part, I shouldn't say every because there's no such thing as every, but most of the individuals hired to be instructors for Baker College were hired because they have real life experience within a particular career field. I would wager to say that it is an expectation that that very real career experience be shared within the classroom with students to provide them real professional experiences, and then relating that to the experiences that the students may encounter someday. And then demonstrating how concepts apply in different contexts. Again, for every career field, there are connections within other career fields. Within every content area, there are connections to other content areas. And it is through those cross-curricular ties that we can really begin to weave paths for students to show them how the content area or the information applies to kind of the world at large. And then the final one is driving course discussion, guiding discussion. And we do this through responding to discussion board postings, correcting or redirecting student misconceptions. When students are learning something, one of the biggest risks is that they're going to learn it in the wrong way. They're going to learn misinformation. And it takes more effort to correct miseducation or misinformation than it does to actually teach it the correct way in the beginning. And so we really need to actively make sure that students are getting and understanding the information and that they're very clear on it. Responding to discussion board posts, elaborating upon original postings. Every time a student posts, it may not always be the most complex. And so it's an opportunity to then take what they posted and put it in a new light, take it to the next level, to build upon it. Utilizing their insights as a springboard to additional discussion and instruction. Maybe the student touches on something that then can be taken to a different facet or a deeper level of understanding or meaning related to the information or the discussion. Responding to discussion board posts, redirecting the discussion to the topic or content of the seminar, making sure that the students are actually discussing the correct thing and staying on topic and not going off on a tangent. Because just like just like in a face-to-face setting, you have the opportunity that students can go in the wrong direction or the topic can get off, the conversation can get off topic. The same thing can happen and does happen on discussion boards. Asking probing questions is a big one because students oftentimes may post in a very vague way. They may not, they may come very close. And so this really goes to getting them to, actually to the next bullet point, to getting them to expand upon or reveal their thinking behind something. And so using those probing questions to do that is extremely important. Okay, so that's kind of the breakdown of the of each one of these best practices. I'm going to skim through some examples. I want to make sure that we have enough time at the end for people to, so we can open the floor to any questions or anything. And so while I have these examples, and what these examples are actual examples that I've pulled from current online classes. And these are very good models for these discussion board best practices. But then I want to be able to get to some actual, some suggestions as to how these could play out. Because this is so new for a lot of our on-ground faculty members, they haven't been practicing these best practices for very long. And so I've come up with some examples or suggestions of how these could, these best practices could be utilized in conjunction with an on-ground classroom setting. And we also have some examples we want to look at and discuss. So to make sure that we have enough time, I'm going to kind of skim through these examples rather than actually reading them to you. This is just a reminder of what we went over of what pushing content looks like. I'm not going to review that again. So in this example, we have a faculty member who is providing content that's relevant to the course concepts. So again, just reiterating, you know, what's already being discussed or providing that real life opportunity. And so this is a post of an article. And the faculty member asks, how does advertising and marketing affect the changing landscape of the industry and why? And so they're providing an article that very much reiterates what's already been discussed, and then providing an opportunity to take it to the next step. And this, what is a very long example, but it's one of my favorites. This is one of our general ed math instructors for online, and he provides this great idea of how math connects back to history. And he provides this very long story of how the city has been barricaded in, and the individuals within the city are trying to figure out how to get out, so they realize they need to build a ladder. And so he connects this to how the process that they went through to build a ladder. And the reason he went through all this was to point out to them that at the time when these individuals were educated, they didn't know that they were going to need to do this. So it just goes to show you how what you're learning today, you don't know when it's going to be useful. And so it connects back to providing new concepts, but also inviting the students to expand their thinking on the current concepts. And then presenting problems that occur in real life. And this instructor talks about how reputation means quite a bit. And then so when you have consulting agencies, individuals' personalities become very important. And so a lot of organizations provide personality tests when they're as part of an interview process. And so, so she then asks students to identify what are other types of employment in which these personality tests may be utilized. And then synthesizing content. This is a geography instructor, and he talks about how the shape of the country can oftentimes relate to the political instability. So he's connecting geography to politics. So if we were to look at some ideas for pushing content, and these ideas expand upon what we do in the online setting, but taking it to the on-ground opportunities, here are some examples of things that could be done. So posting a video to support classroom discussions, providing a link to an external site to support the classroom content, having students posting a summary, completing exit or entrance tickets on the discussion board prior to or after class, having students do a pre-assessment of a KWL, which stands for what do you know, what do you want to know, and what have you learned regarding the topic, posting concept or mind maps, and then recording lectures and posting them in the discussion board to have students review before coming to class. And so these are just some ideas related to pushing content. So now, before we go to the next slide, what we're going to do now is we're going to look at two examples. If you look within the participants window at the bottom, you see a hand. If you click on that hand, what it's going to do is it's going to it's going to show everyone next to your name like you're raising your hand. And so I want to utilize that tool as we look at the exercise. So if we look at the exercise here, so for exercise 1A, the instructor posts, students, please post any questions that you have about the course content or the assignments to this thread. So who within our group here thinks that 1A is an example of pushing content? And if you do think it's an example, please raise your hand. Okay, it looks like no one, oh, okay, Amy thinks that that's an example. Okay. If we think about our definition or our bullet points for pushing content, remember that it is adding content to the class or building upon the content that's already there or having students actually apply content. So this wouldn't be an example because we're not adding anything to the class. We're not building upon the content or reiterating or pushing it. So if we look at 1B, the instructor posts, check out this link to see an example of the main topic of this chapter. So who thinks that this would be an example? do apologize for the noise. I don't know why my computer's doing that. Let me turn off the speaker. Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of hands. Excellent. Yes, this would be an example of pushing content because we are adding information to the class. We are, if nothing else, reiterating. Thank you, Bill. Bill sent me a private message that says depends on the link. You're absolutely right. And I will share out this presentation, and I encourage everyone to go out there and click on the link and see what it takes them to. So yes, this is absolutely an example of pushing content. So because we are all evaluators, and when we look at working on a professional growth plan, we're looking for those opportunities. If an instructor did this, I would say yes, they're pushing content. But there is opportunity to build upon this to make it a more dynamic post. One thing that I would recommend if I were to see an instructor doing this is, okay, you've provided that link, but are you asking the student to actually do anything with it? And that would be the next step with this. When we are kind of enriching the environment with this, when we're pushing to a higher level of quality, we want students to actually interact with this information and have it impact their thought and be active with it rather than just having a very passive experience with it. So yes, 1B is definitely an example, but it can always be enriched. It's something that I just want to throw out there. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go on. I'm getting a couple of private messages here, but I'm going to go on. One of the private messages asks if we could consider 1A because we're getting them to think about the content. My argument against that, and I'm not saying that you're wrong, I'm saying that I wouldn't necessarily personally agree with that, but my argument against that is that we're not providing anything, we're not necessarily asking them to engage. The only way that the content gets pushed is if they actually have a question and they actually get a response and interact with that response. So it could be considered, but in a very passive way. All right, let's go ahead and move on. I have been informed that you can't see the hands. So if while I'm talking, I'll kind of give you a summary of the hands that pop up on our next exercises. So this slide, of course, again, going back over practical application, I'm not going to review it. I'm going to jump into the examples. So in this example, we have a student, so we're talking about connecting this to practical application, and this is back to one of our math courses. And this is an example of how standard deviations work. And so the student posts about if they don't finish their yogurt, they still record the full amount of calories if they're counting calories. And the instructor says that, yes, that's right. And when we look at statistics, we have that happen where something is not necessarily going to be the exact amount that's listed on the box, or it's not going to be the exact amount of calories, but it's going to be close. And so there's that standard deviation within statistics that's allowed. This instructor provides an example of, and she uses an analogy to talk about doing research. And she provides the analogy of the kitchen sink, and they're looking for the sponge. And if they would have known where to look and they would go directly for the drain because that's where the sponge is, then they could avoid all the other parts. And so because they're not clearly stating the problem that the sponge is missing, they have to go through all the mucky stuff to get to the actual sponge. In this case, we have, oops, sorry about that. My computer at home is being very touchy. Okay, here we go. There we go. So this instructor utilized this map, and he's connecting to real-life applications. And so when talking about demographic maps, this one in particular, and this ties to current events, shows states and countries in which kind of the status of gay marriage. That's a hot topic item right now. And so he's relating this to current events and providing an example of how maps like this can show relationships. This instructor is relating to professional experiences. She's a small business owner, and she talks about how valuing employees and showing employees that they're valued can actually help in terms of morale and can help get the actual retail store get through hard times. And then we have applying concepts in different contexts. And so this is back to the math class. This instructor is taking the geometry concepts and talking about how they play out in architecture. So if we are going to the on-ground ideas of, sorry about that again. If we're going to the on-ground ideas of practical application, posting videos to show real-life application of content, providing case studies in which the students can work with information to come up with a solution, providing them with scenarios in which the information will play out, and then posting and sharing experiences if students are doing a practicum. The last bullet point is really great because it's an opportunity for the students to share their own experiences. If you're in, let's say, an early level class of a particular topic, having students share their own experiences is a great way to have them, become more engaged on the discussion board, because now they're telling their own story. And not that I have to tell any of you that, but it's just a great opportunity to really leverage the discussion board. So those are some suggestions. So here are some exercises. And again, raise your hand if you agree with that this is an example of practical application. So 2A says, the instructor posts, while I was employed within the public education system, I worked with special education students in 3 different school districts, 1 suburban district, 1 urban district, and 1 rural district. During that time, I had a total of 40 students. Within that 40 students, I had 7 female students, and the rest were male. How does this represent or relate to our conversation regarding point of view and expectations in our social problems class? So who would feel that that is actually an example of practical application? Okay, I'm getting a lot of hands, and for those who are weighing in and those who are paying attention, absolutely. This is an example of practical application. This is the instructor sharing their experiences and providing a link as to how the concept actually connects and plays out in real life. Okay, 2B says, has anyone had experiences with this in their work setting? Now, we don't know what this is, but let's assume that the students would know what this refers to. So the post is, has anyone had experiences with this in their work setting? So who feels that 2B would be an example? Okay, we have quite a few people who think that this is an example, and again, I would agree. I don't think it's a phenomenal example. I would never use this one as an exemplar, but it's definitely the opportunity for the student to connect. It's an opportunity for the student to connect the information to their own lives or pull their own experiences and connect it back to the content. Now, I think there's definitely opportunities where if this were the only post that the instructor were making, if they weren't elaborating, if they weren't building upon it, so maybe the conversation on the discussion board begins with this, but then we would want to see those aspects of guiding discussion that we're going to talk about in a second to get students to elaborate on this and to weave a very rich, dynamic conversation on the discussion board. Okay, so I'm getting ready to move into our final grouping of best practices, which is guiding discussion. So this is, again, a reminder of the bullet points of what we went over for guiding discussion. I'm not going to review that, but I want to throw that up there so everyone has an opportunity to kind of skim over it again themselves. So if we look at some examples, this is an example of responding to students and redirecting their misconceptions. And in this example, a student in a math class followed PEMDAS, parentheses, exclamation points, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction, to complete a problem. Well, if you follow that exactly, you can come up with an incorrect answer because in PEMDAS, multiplication and division are actually equal, and so you follow the order, and the same for addition and subtraction. And so that impacted their answer. And so if they got the incorrect answer, we reiterate and we remind them of certain very important aspects of the rules that we lay out in terms of the processes and order of operations and things like that. And then we ask them to revisit it. And that's an important thing about guiding discussion and utilizing the discussion board for practice-based things. It is more powerful to provide insight and feedback and then ask students to revisit it and rework with it to see if they can get the correct answer than simply telling them that it's incorrect and providing them with the correct answer. And that's just food for thought that I'll throw out there as we have opportunities to guide and to coach instructors. Okay, utilizing student insights as a springboard to additional discussion and instruction. And so in this case, a student gives their opinion or they utilize insight from the content to respond. In this case, we're talking about cyberbullying, and then it's providing them an opportunity to take that information and go out onto the web and do a little bit of research and come back to us related to a current event or recent events related to that topic. So in this case, ask them to go out and find out which states have laws or legislation regarding cyberbullying and what are some of the required activities that schools have to do to be compliant with those laws. Responding to discussion board posting, redirecting the discussion. In this example, we have what would likely be a group of healthcare professionals or budding healthcare professionals talking about the Affordable Care Act. And the Affordable Care Act is, of course, quite controversial, and so there's a lot of misconceptions and there's a lot of arguments about the Affordable Care Act. Well, since it's a very controversial and heated topic, it's very easy for something like that to get off base. And so redirecting them back to the main conversation. And then in this case, one of the, and I see there's a misspelling in here for affordable instead of affordable, but in any case, one of the strengths of this example here is that not only are they being redirected, but providing them a resource in the redirection so that it gives them something that they can actually focus on rather than risking, again, them going in a very wide-angled direction. This really focuses them back on the topic and inhibits them from going out and finding a lot of other resources that maybe do or don't apply. Sometimes it helps to guide students to specific resources because you know that they're quality and they specifically relate to and pertain to what's actually being discussed. Asking probing questions, what, how, and why. And so in this example, and again, we're trying to test assumptions behind their reasoning. What would be the outcome if I forgot to put brackets around my elements in my HTML document? How would using a culturally sensitive communication style affect the outcome of the disagreement? Why is it a requirement to read an individual their Miranda rights with each arrest? And so even if students give short one-line answers, or if you're trying to hone in on very specific points, the what, the how, and the why questions can really help facilitate that. Encourage students to elaborate on previous posts. And in this case, you know, oftentimes when students either don't understand something or they haven't actually connected in with the content or the resources for the course, maybe they've just skimmed the content of the resources, they may provide a very vague response. And so that's an opportunity to encourage them to expand upon their post. So in this example, they have provided a very high-level difference between Freud and Piaget. And so in this case, we're asking them to list specific differences between the two theories. And then also providing them some guidance. So for example, think about how each theorist identifies the different stages of development or the results of not fully developing within those stages. And so that provides, again, a clear path for the student, if you will, in terms of engaging with the content and actually providing some substantive response. So here are some suggestions for on-ground. Mini lectures, clearing up confusing points from class, asking students to post what their murkiest point is. Murkiest point, you may, if any of you have done any work with college assessment techniques or classroom assessment techniques. Providing additional resources to remediate skills or information. This is a big one, especially when you get into the upper level courses. Maybe a student has gone up through the prerequisite courses, passing but not fully understanding some of the policies, procedures, or problems that they're supposed to know how to solve or do. And so it may be an opportunity to strategically provide some remediation resources, such as a mini lecture or additional examples, and they can be implemented kind of as a just-in-time resource for those students to self-select themselves to need to do that. Posting content to continue the discussion, asking students to post their salient details, so what's the important thing you're taking away from tonight's class. Posting an important concept, asking students to rephrase in their own words or to build off what is posted by others, and then just an example of some verbiage. What is important to remember about blank, and you cannot repeat what anyone else says. And I really like adding that one because it's very easy for students to reword what others say, and so when you can remove that, you know, it kind of enforces them going back and putting things in their own words or finding their own important thing. Okay. All right. This is my last slide. Oh, I'm sorry. We have the exercise. So 3A. So this would be an example of what an instructor might post. During our class discussion, I noticed that there were some confused looks and less participation than usual. We ran out of time before I could review the main concepts again, but I have created a mini lecture reviewing the main concepts and some examples. It is available at the link below. Please review it and reply on this thread with any murky point that you may still have. So who thinks that this might be an example? Excellent. Seeing lots of hands. All right, let's look at 3B. Please post an example of how you see biodiversity in your day-to-day life. Okay. 3B would be an opportunity for guiding discussion as well, because it would allow you to see how students understand things. It is also an opportunity for providing practical application as well. There's no rule that says a post has to be one or the other, but in this case it could be both. Okay, so that was my last slide, and First of all, I want to apologize for two bad behaviors when it comes to presenting. One, I went very fast, and that is because there's a lot of content that I wanted to make sure that I reviewed. I did some similar work with the group yesterday, and it was very well received. I wanted to make sure I provided that same opportunity for everyone in this group today. And the second piece is that at no point during the conversation did I open the floor up to anyone to add their own examples. And that's something that I really should have done. But again, for the exact same reason, I wanted to kind of plow through the information because I know that everyone is extremely busy, and I don't trust that everyone's going to have time to go back and review the information on their own after this. But I also wanted to make sure that we had some time left over at the end of the presentation so that I can respect everyone's schedule and their 1-hour commitment to this. And I'll open the floor up to anyone that either has some suggestions to build off of the suggestions that I provided, such as the ideas for the on-around piece, or to ask any questions about anything that needs to be cleared up or some implementation questions. I will share very quickly one last thing, that I was fortunate enough to be able to go and present at Clinton Township this type of information at Clinton Township's faculty kickoff. And it was very interesting to talk to those faculty members and to actually field their questions, and to realize that for some of them, they're early adopters of this, but other ones are just getting up and going. And so a lot of the questions, some of the questions are going to focus on that quality implementation piece, but the other ones are going to be of the operational pieces. And so you evaluators have a large task ahead of you to kind of field that information. And I want to make sure that you take advantage of any resource that we can provide you to help you with that.
Does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask?
Wow, I didn't realize I was that good.
Okay, well, if there are no questions, we'll give it just a couple more seconds while I go over a couple of things. If you do have some questions, we can still answer them. The WebEx goes for another 10 minutes, I believe. We may not hold you that long if nobody has questions. What I would like to do is just a reminder that Wednesday, November 12th, will be the next evaluator session titled Feedback That Works, Reinforcing the Use of Blackboard Professional Expectations. David Gomez from the Jackson campus and Tim Stein from Muskegon will be our presenters for that. At the same time as doing these evaluator PD sessions, we are also holding faculty PD sessions. Our first one will be next Tuesday, October 14th at 2 o'clock. Blackboard, filling in the gaps and answering your questions. Faculty can attend that if they would like to. And then on October, we also have a second session, Wednesday, October 22nd, Blackboard exemplars for the 4 professional development expectations. Cindy Van Giesen from the Jackson campus, and then Randy Hill from the Cadillac campus will be presenting that.
And Allison, if I can add just a note to evaluators in regards to connecting this to the faculty piece. When the IES group put together the calendar of the evaluator professional developments and the faculty professional developments, the idea was that one is going to link to the other. So, but the evaluator piece will lead the instructor piece. So today we're talking about best practices so that you as the evaluator know what to go in and look for, or to give you ideas. And so then the follow-up faculty professional development will then give them information on best practices. So if you were to say, see, now that you have a raised awareness of certain things, and you see things that you would recommend faculty improve skills upon, well, you now know that, you know, in a couple weeks there's going to be a PD coming up, and even if it happens after that, then you know that there is a recorded one that you can direct the faculty member to as a resource as you are providing that guidance and coaching and opportunities for growth.
Thank you, Dustin. At this point, if anybody, I'm going to give it one last shot. Does anybody have any questions about anything? Well, I'd like to thank you for attending the session, and right now I guess we will end it. If you have any questions, you can, if you are currently not showing up on the participant list at all, I need you to email etl@baker.edu and let me know that which call-in user you were. Dustin?
We do have a question from Cindy.
Oh.
It's on the chat. Once an instructor has posed an exploratory question, how long should the conversation continue? That's a really good question, Cindy, and I would say that that's a very individual decision. So if the faculty member is utilizing the discussion board to just kind of have that link between each class, if you're talking about how long they should let it continue before they then jump back into the discussion, I would say give it, it depends on the expectations in terms of participation. I would say that they probably need to give it a couple days to allow students to actually get back in there and post. But if the question is how long should the entire conversation go on, then they really need to think about how they're connecting the SLOs to the course or the content. Likely, if the idea is to get them to engage with the content from one session to the next, then the conversation should go on for a week. But if the idea is larger, like they're trying to get them to interweave various concepts, then that conversation can go on for more than a week. It can go on for multiple weeks. It depends.
Oh, that makes good sense, Dustin. You know what? It just occurred to me. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Yeah, it just occurred to me, wouldn't that be cool if, let's say the students have a project that they have to, or a presentation that they have to put together by the end of the quarter, or a major research paper or whatever. There could be, the instructor could have designed specific exploratory questions throughout that and be posted during that discussion board to help prompt them. I just see so many rich opportunities. It's just a matter of getting these ideas out to faculty. So thanks for this presentation. It was really good.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate hearing that. And I can't exactly take all the credit because this is work that this is wonderful work that was done before I arrived with Baker Online, and I get the privilege of just taking concepts and run with it. And so I can't take all the credit, but I do appreciate you saying that.
Do we have any additional questions? Okay, you're more than welcome to log out, and everybody have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Allison. You did a great job hosting.
Thank you. Can you turn the screen back over to me, Dustin?
Oh, yeah. Sure.